Captain Quante stood on the bridge of the human starship New Sol, watching the massive Zephyrian vessel approach through the viewport. 3 years of careful negotiations had led to this moment, humanity's first face-to-face meeting with an alien civilization. The Zephyrians had been surprisingly friendly in their long-distance communications, agreeing to meet at a neutral space station for formal diplomatic talks. "Captain, their ship is incredible," whispered Lieutenant Minho from the navigation station. The Zephyrian vessel looked like a giant golden beetle, its surface gleaming with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the starlight. It was easily 5 times larger than any human ship, yet it moved with surprising grace. Ambassador Yuna checked her translation device one final time. As Earth's top diplomat, she had spent months learning Zephyrian customs and language. "Remember, Captain," she said quietly, "they're a warrior culture, but they value honor above all else. Show respect, but don't appear weak." Tay nodded, adjusting his formal military uniform. At 35, he was young for a starship captain, but his tactical brilliance had earned him this crucial assignment. He had studied every available piece of information about the Zephyrians, from their insect-like appearance to their complex social structure. The space station's docking bay was enormous, designed to accommodate ships from multiple species. As the human delegation walked toward the meeting chamber, Tay couldn't help but feel nervous. Through the station's windows, he could see the Zephyrian ship's cargo bay opening, revealing figures moving in the shadows. "Here they come," Yuna murmured. The Zephyrians were both beautiful and terrifying. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with sleek exoskeletons that gleamed like polished armor. Their forearms moved with fluid precision, and their large compound eyes reflected the station's lights like jewels. Queen Vexathi led the group, her golden crown marking her royal status. Despite their alien appearance, there was something undeniably regal about her presence. The formal greeting ceremony began according to ancient Zephyrian tradition. Tay and his team stood in formation, while the Queen's warriors performed an elaborate ritual dance. The sound of their clicking mandibles created a strange rhythmic music that echoed through the chamber. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. Queen Vexathi approached the human delegation with what appeared to be friendly curiosity. Her translator, a smaller Zephyrian with silver markings, spoke in broken but understandable English. "Great Queen welcomes brave humans to sacred meeting place," the translator announced. "She honors your courage in crossing the dark void to reach us." Ambassador Yuna stepped forward with a carefully prepared response about friendship between species. But before she could speak, something unexpected happened. Queen Vexathi suddenly stopped walking and stared directly at Captain Tay. Her large compound eyes seemed to study him with intense interest. The Queen began speaking rapidly in her own language, gesturing toward Tay with all 4 arms. Her warriors immediately moved closer, their posture shifting from ceremonial to alert. The translator looked confused and frightened. "What is she saying?" Yuna demanded, but the translator seemed too shocked to respond properly. Finally, the Queen spoke in heavily accented English, her voice carrying absolute authority. "This one," she said, pointing directly at Tay, "carries the essence of a true warrior. His spirit calls to mine across the void between worlds." Tay felt his heart racing as the alien queen continued to stare at him. Something was going terribly wrong, but he couldn't understand what. "By the ancient laws of my people," Queen Vexathi declared, her voice echoing through the chamber, "I claim this human as my bonded mate. His warrior soul shall join with mine, and together we shall rule the galaxy." The words hit the human delegation like a physical blow. Ambassador Yuna immediately stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite her shock. "Your Majesty, there must be some misunderstanding," she said firmly. "Captain Tay is here as a representative of humanity, not as a personal offering. Our species doesn't practice arranged marriages with other civilizations." But Queen Vexathi was no longer listening to diplomatic protests. She gestured to her warriors, and they immediately surrounded Tay. Despite his military training, he found himself completely outnumbered by beings who were stronger, faster, and better armed than any human. "The claiming has been made," the Queen announced with finality. It cannot be undone. This warrior now belongs to me, and through him I shall learn the secrets of human strength. The next few minutes passed in a blur of confusion and fear. Tay tried to resist, but Zephyrian technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. A strange energy field surrounded him, making his movements slow and clumsy. "Captain!" Yuna shouted, but there was nothing she could do. The Queen's warriors were already escorting Tay toward their ship, while other Zephyrians blocked the human delegation from following. As he was led away, Tay caught one last glimpse of his crew. Their faces showed a mixture of horror and helplessness. That would haunt him for months to come. Ambassador Yuna was already speaking urgently into her communicator, no doubt trying to contact Earth for instructions. But Tay knew it was too late. Whatever had just happened, he was now completely at the mercy of an alien queen who saw him not as a person, but as property to be claimed. Tay woke up in what could only be described as the most beautiful prison cell in the galaxy. The room was enormous, easily 3 times the size of his captain's quarters back on the New Sol. Golden walls curved upward into a domed ceiling that displayed what looked like a live view of space, complete with slowly moving stars and distant nebulae. Soft ambient light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, but despite all the luxury, he was still a prisoner. The door had no visible handle on the inside, and when he pressed against it, nothing happened. The walls felt warm too, the touch almost alive, which made sense given that Zephyrian architecture seemed to blend technology with biology in ways humans barely understood. A soft chiming sound announced the arrival of his first visitor. The door dissolved like mist, revealing a smaller Zephyrian with pale blue markings across her exoskeleton. Unlike the warriors he had seen during his capture, this one moved with quiet grace and kept her 4 arms folded respectfully. "I am Kiranel," she said in surprisingly clear English. "I have been assigned as your caretaker." "You mean guard," Tay replied bluntly. Kiranel's compound eyes flickered in what might have been embarrassment. "I am here to ensure your comfort and help you understand our ways. The Queen wishes you to be happy in your new home." "This isn't my home," Tay said, but he kept his voice calm. Getting angry wouldn't help his situation. "I'm a prisoner here." "You are the Queen's chosen mate," Kiranel corrected gently. "That is a position of great honor among my people. Many would kill for such status." Over the following days, Tay learned that his caretaker was actually quite eager to talk. Kiranel seemed genuinely curious about human culture, asking endless questions about Earth, human relationships, and why Tay seemed so unhappy about his situation. In return, Tay began to understand the complex world he had been thrust into. Zephyrian society was ruled entirely by females, with males holding only supporting roles. The Queen was not just a political leader, but almost a goddess figure, whose word was absolute law. Her choice of a mate was considered a divine decision. That could not be questioned. "But I'm not even the same species," Tay pointed out during one of their conversations. "How can this possibly work?" Kiranel's mandibles clicked. In what he was learning indicated confusion. Species matters little when souls recognize each other. The Queen saw your warrior essence the moment you entered the sacred chamber. She says your spirit burns with the same fire as the ancient heroes of our people. "That's ridiculous," Tay muttered, but he was beginning to understand that arguing logic with religious beliefs was pointless. As the days passed, more Zephyrians came to visit him. Some were obviously high-ranking officials who studied him like a curious specimen. Others seemed to be servants bringing increasingly elaborate meals that he could barely identify, let alone enjoy. The food wasn't bad exactly, but it was clearly designed for a completely different digestive system. The worst part came when Queen Vexathi herself began making regular visits. She would arrive with great ceremony, accompanied by guards and advisors, expecting Tay to participate in what Kiranel called bonding rituals. These sessions were deeply uncomfortable. The Queen would sit across from him and speak in her native language while burning strange incense that made the air shimmer. She expected him to respond in kind, to show affection and submission in ways that felt completely wrong to his human sensibilities. "I will not pretend to be your husband," Tay told her firmly during one particularly tense encounter. "I was brought here against my will. I have a life, a career, people who care about me back on Earth." Queen Vexathi's response was swift and angry. Her compound eyes darkened, and she spoke rapidly to her advisors in words that sounded like sharp clicks and hisses. Even without understanding the language, Tay could tell she was furious. "The Queen is displeased," Kiranel told him later, after the royal entourage had stormed out. "She cannot understand why you resist what she sees as a great honor." Some of her advisors are suggesting that humans may be too primitive to appreciate Zephyrian culture. "Good," Tay said. "Maybe she'll send me home." But Kiranel shook her head sadly. "You do not understand. The Queen has claimed you before the entire court. To release you now would be seen as weakness, and weakness can be fatal for a ruler. She cannot let you go, even if she wanted to." That day, night, Tay lay on the strange gel-filled bed that adjusted to his body temperature and tried to think of a way out. The Queen's frustration was growing with each failed bonding session. According to Kiranel, some of the court advisors were whispering that perhaps the Queen had made a mistake, that this human was defective somehow. Tay realized he was walking a dangerous line. If he continued to resist, he might anger the Queen enough that she would simply dispose of him. But if he gave in and played along with her rituals, he would be trapped forever in this golden cage, a trophy husband in an alien court. Somewhere between those two extremes, he needed to find a third option. He needed to become valuable to the Zephyrians in a way that had nothing to do with being the Queen's mate. But first, he had to learn much more about their society, their weaknesses, and their enemies. The game was just beginning. After 2 weeks of failed bonding rituals, Queen Vexathi's visits became less formal and more unpersonal. Instead of the grand ceremonies with incense and chanting, she began arriving alone, clearly frustrated and confused by Tay's continued resistance. "Your people confuse me," she said during one late evening visit, her forearms gesturing with obvious irritation. "On your homeworld, do males not feel honored when chosen by a powerful female?" Tay studied her carefully. This was the first time she had asked him a direct question about human culture rather than simply expecting him to submit. He decided to take a risk. "On Earth, partnerships are based on mutual choice," he said slowly. "Both people must agree. Force makes love impossible." The Queen's compound eyes flickered with what might have been surprise. "Love?" She repeated the word like it was foreign. "I do not speak of love. I speak of duty, strength, the continuation of power." "Then you've never experienced what humans call love," Tay replied. "No wonder you don't understand why I resist." Something shifted in Queen Vexathi's expression. For just a moment, her regal mask slipped and Tay saw something unexpected underneath. Loneliness. "Tell me about this." "Love," she said quietly. Over the following nights, their conversations became less about bonding rituals and more about the fundamental differences between their species. Tay learned that Zephyrian queens were expected to choose mates based purely on genetic strength and political advantage. The concept of emotional attachment was not just foreign but actually considered a weakness. "My mother ruled for 300 years, Queen Vexathi explained during one of these talks. She chose 7 mates, all selected for their warrior bloodlines. She felt nothing for any of them, and they served their purpose by giving her strong heirs. "That sounds terribly empty," Tay said. "Empty?" The Queen seemed genuinely puzzled. "It was efficient. Emotion clouds judgment. My mother never made decisions based on feelings, which is why our empire grew so strong under her rule." But as they talked more, Tay began to understand the pressures Queen Vexathi faced. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't the unified, peaceful civilization it appeared to be from the outside. It was actually a collection of constantly competing houses, each one looking for any sign of weakness in their ruler. "House Drexani questions my choice of you," the Queen admitted during one particularly candid conversation. "They say that claiming an alien mate shows I am becoming soft, too influenced by foreign ideas." "What do you tell them?" Tay asked. "That human tactical brilliance could strengthen our military," she replied. "Your species defeated the Kalian raiders using ships that were technically inferior. Our war council is very interested in human strategy." This was the first Ty had heard about humans fighting anyone called Kalian raiders. He made a mental note to ask Kiranel about this later. House Thexori supports my decision, the Queen continued, but only because they hope to gain access to human technology through our bond. And House Veclani... She paused, her mandibles clicking with what Ty now recognized as anxiety. They openly suggest that I should step down if I cannot choose a proper Zephyrian mate. Suddenly Tay understood. This wasn't really about him at all. Queen Vexathi was fighting for her political survival, and claiming him had somehow become a test of her worthiness to rule. Your people evolved on a harsh world, he said, remembering something Kiranel had mentioned. That's why strength matters so much to you. The Queen's eyes widened slightly. You have been studying our history. A little. Your homeworld had multiple predator species, constant resource wars, climate disasters. Only the strongest survived. Yes, she said softly. Our ancestors lived in underground hives, always fighting for survival. The females became leaders because they were larger, stronger, better at organizing defenses. Males became supporters because that was how the species survived. But you're not on your homeworld anymore, Tay pointed out. You have an empire, technology, plenty of resources. Why do you still follow the same patterns? Queen Vexathi was quiet for a long moment. Because that is what we have always done. That is who we are. Or maybe it's who you used to be, Tay suggested carefully. Over the next several days, Tay began to put his new understanding to use. When court officials visited him, he started asking subtle questions about the different houses and their rivalries. He learned that House Drexani controlled much of the military, while House Thexori dominated trade and technology. House Veclani was smaller but influential, because they controlled the religious ceremonies that legitimized royal power. Most importantly, he discovered that all three houses were constantly maneuvering against each other, looking for any advantage they could gain over their rivals. During his conversations with Queen Vexathi, Tay began to carefully mention things he had overheard from his various visitors. Nothing direct or accusatory, just small observations that planted seeds of doubt. That advisor from House Drexani seemed very interested in your military plans, he might say casually. He asked me several questions about human weapons technology. Or, the trade representative from House Thexori wanted to know if humans would be willing to bypass the royal court and deal directly with individual houses. Each comment was designed to make the Queen more aware of how her nobles were pursuing their own agendas. At the same time, Tay began to show subtle signs of gradual acceptance of his situation. He stopped outright refusing to participate in ceremonies, instead asking questions about their meaning and purpose. I want to understand your ways, he told the Queen. If I'm going to be here, I should at least try to learn. This small shift in attitude had an immediate effect. Queen Vexathi began to relax around him, and the tension in the court decreased noticeably. But Tay was playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. He was learning everything he could about Zephyrian politics, military capabilities, and social structures. And slowly, carefully, he was positioning himself not just as the Queen's mate, but as someone who might actually be useful to her survival. The real question was whether he could walk this tightrope long enough to find a way out, or if he would become so entangled in alien politics that escape would become impossible. 3 weeks into his captivity, Tay made a discovery that changed everything. While studying ancient Zephyrian texts that Kiranel had brought him, he found a reference to something called the Trials of Worth, an old law that allowed any claimed mate to prove their value to the Empire through tests of skill and intelligence. This is interesting, he said to Kiranel, pointing to the passage written in flowing Zephyrian script. It says here that if a bonded mate can demonstrate exceptional worth to the Empire, they can renegotiate the terms of their binding. Kiranel's compound eyes flickered nervously. Those laws are very old, from the time of the Great Wars. No one has invoked them in over 2 centuries. But they still exist? Tay pressed. Technically, yes, but Captain Tay, you must understand, the trials are extremely dangerous. They were designed to test warriors who had trained their entire lives for combat. Many who attempted them did not survive. That evening, when Queen Vexathi made her usual visit, Tay brought up the ancient law. Her reaction was immediate and intense. "You wish to challenge your bonding?" she asked, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "You would risk death, rather, than accept the honor I have given you." "I wish to prove that I can be valuable to your empire in ways beyond just being a trophy," Tay replied carefully. "If I succeed in the trials, I'll have earned my place here through my own merit, not just because you claimed me." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Around them, her advisors whispered urgently among themselves. Tay caught fragments of their rapid conversation. Some sounded excited by the prospect, others clearly thought he was insane. "The trials have not been attempted in my lifetime," Queen Vexathi said finally. "If you fail, you will die. If you succeed—" She paused, considering. "If you succeed, the Empire will know that my choice was wise." 3 days later, Tay found himself standing in the center of the royal arena, a massive amphitheater carved from black stone. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the seats, their compound eyes glittering in the artificial sunlight that streamed down from the dome overhead. Representatives from all the major houses were present, along with military commanders, trade officials, and religious leaders. The first trial was combat. Tay faced off against a Zephyrian warrior named Kexithul, who stood nearly 9 feet tall and carried weapons that hummed with energy. The crowd expected this to be over quickly. No soft human could possibly match a trained Zephyrian fighter. But Tay had advantages they didn't expect. Human reflexes worked differently than Zephyrian ones. Where his opponent relied on strength and straightforward attacks, Tay used speed, misdirection, and tactics his alien opponent had never encountered. He rolled under Kexthul's first energy blast, using the warrior's size against him. When the Zephyrian swung his massive weapon in a wide arc, Tay was already behind him, striking at pressure points he had observed during his weeks of captivity. The fight lasted longer than anyone expected. Tay couldn't match his opponent's strength, but he could outthink him. He used the arena's environment, turning walls and obstacles into tactical advantages. When Kexthul finally fell, stunned by a perfectly timed strike to his nerve cluster, the crowd fell silent. "Impressive," Queen Vexathi announced from her royal platform. "The human shows cunning where we expected only weakness. The second trial will test his mind." The strategy trial was even more revealing. Tay was presented with a holographic battle scenario, a complex military situation involving multiple fleets, planetary defenses, and supply lines. It was based on an actual historical battle where the Zephyrian Empire had suffered heavy losses. "You have 1 hour to devise a solution," the military commander Vexdraki announced. "Our best strategists took 3 days to develop their original plan and still lost 40% of our forces." Tay studied the scenario carefully. The Zephyrian approach was typically direct, overwhelming force applied to the strongest enemy positions, but he could see weaknesses they had missed, opportunities for deception and misdirection. "Your enemy. They expect you to attack their main fleet," he said after 30 minutes of analysis. "They've positioned their strongest ships to counter that exact strategy. But look here." He highlighted a section of the hologram. "Their supply convoy is protected by only 3 escort vessels. If you could take out their fuel depot while making them think you're preparing a frontal assault." The strategy he outlined was complex but elegant. Instead of the crushing frontal attack that was traditional Zephyrian doctrine, he proposed a multi-layered deception. Fake communications to suggest preparation for a massive assault, while small, fast ships circled around to attack the enemy's vulnerable supply lines. "When they move their main fleet to defend against your apparent attack," Tay explained, "their rear positions will be weakened. That's when you hit them with everything you have, but from an unexpected direction." The military advisors were clearly intrigued. Several of them began asking detailed questions about human tactical doctrine, wanting to understand how such strategies had developed. The final trial was the most dangerous, a test of leadership under pressure. Tay was placed in command of a small Zephyrian unit and given a real mission: infiltrate and shut down a rebel communications outpost that had been causing problems for the Empire. "If you fail," Queen Vexathi warned, "my warriors may not return alive, and neither will you." The The mission gave Tay his first real look at Zephyrian military technology and capabilities. Their equipment was impressive, but overly complex. Their tactics were effective, but predictable. Most importantly, he learned about the rebels, apparently a growing faction that opposed the current government. Instead of the direct assault his Zephyrian soldiers expected, Tay planned a careful infiltration. He had studied the enemy's patterns, identified their weaknesses, and developed a plan that would accomplish the mission with minimal casualties. The operation was a complete success. Not only did they shut down the rebel communications, but they captured valuable intelligence about the rebel network's structure and plans. When they returned to the royal court, Queen Vexathi looked at Tay with something that might have been genuine respect. "You have passed all 3 trials," she announced to the assembled crowd. "This human has proven his worth to our empire through combat skill, strategic brilliance, and leadership ability." The crowd's reaction was mixed but impressed. Tay had done something no one thought possible. He had earned his place through merit rather than just the Queen's arbitrary choice. But more importantly, he had learned crucial information about Zephyrian military strengths, weaknesses, and the growing internal rebellion that threatened their empire. Knowledge that might eventually prove to be the key to his freedom. The attack came at dawn, just as the palace was beginning its daily routines. Tay was in his quarters, reviewing star charts that Kiranel had brought him, when the building suddenly shook with a massive explosion. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the complex, their alien tones unlike anything he had heard before. "What's happening?" he called to Kiranel, who had gone rigid with fear. "The palace is under attack," she whispered, her compound eyes wide with terror. This has not happened in over 50 years. Through his window, Tay could see armed Zephyrian soldiers fighting in the courtyards below. But something was wrong. They were fighting each other. This wasn't an external invasion. It was a civil war. The door to his quarters dissolved, and Queen Vexathi rushed in with a small group of loyal guards. Her usually perfect royal appearance was disheveled, and there was a deep cut along one of her 4 arms. "House Krexani has betrayed us," she said urgently. "They have allied with the rebels and launched a coup. My personal guard is trying to evacuate me to the secure bunkers, but the palace defenses have been compromised." "How many are attacking?" Tay asked immediately. Queen Vexathi looked surprised by his question. "Why do you ask? You are my prisoner, not my advisor." "Because I've spent weeks studying your security systems," Tay replied bluntly. "And right now you need all the help you can get." Another explosion rocked the building, this one much closer. Through the communications device one of the guards carried, they could hear rapid reports coming in from around the palace. The situation was deteriorating quickly. 3 assault groups, the Queen answered reluctantly. "Perhaps 200 warriors total. They have taken the main armory and are advancing on the throne room. My forces are outnumbered and falling back." Tay's mind raced as he processed the tactical situation. During his trials, he had memorized the palace layout and studied the defensive systems. The Zephyrian approach would be to fall back to prepared positions and make a stand, but that would only work if they had superior numbers. "Your guards are thinking like Zephyrians," he said. "Direct defense, holding strong positions, but the attackers are also Zephyrians. They know exactly what you'll do." "What are you suggesting?" Queen Vexathi demanded. "Let me help coordinate your defense," Tay said. "Human tactics. They won't expect it." For a moment the Queen hesitated. Trusting her strategic defense to a human prisoner seemed insane. But another explosion, even closer this time, made the decision for her. "What do you need?" she asked. "Access to your communication system and a complete map of the palace structure," Tay replied immediately. "And I need your guards to follow my instructions, even if they seem strange." The next hour was the most intense of Tay's life. Instead of the traditional Zephyrian strategy of fallback and defense, he implemented a series of tactical moves that confused and frustrated the attackers. He ordered the Queen's forces to abandon certain positions that looked strategically important but were actually traps. When House Krexani warriors rushed to occupy these areas, they found themselves isolated and surrounded by hidden defensive systems that Tay activated remotely. "Pull back from the east wing," he commanded through the comm system. "Make it look like you're retreating in panic. That will give them access to the royal quarters, one of the guard commanders protested. Exactly, Tay replied. And when they get there, they'll find that I've redirected all the automated defense turrets to create a crossfire pattern in that corridor. The strategy worked perfectly. House Krexani forces, expecting to find the Queen cowering in her chambers, instead walked into a devastating ambush. The automated weapons systems cut down dozens of attackers before they realized they had been outmaneuvered. But Tai's most brilliant move came when he analyzed the attack patterns and realized that the rebels were following a coordinated plan. That relied on precise timing. They're using your own emergency protocols against you, he explained to Queen Vexathi. Someone gave them access to your contingency plans. They know exactly which routes your guards will use to evacuate you. Impossible, the Queen said. Those plans are known only to my most trusted advisors. Then one of your most trusted advisors is a traitor, Tay replied grimly. Instead of following the standard evacuation route, Tay guided the Queen's group through a series of maintenance tunnels and service corridors that didn't appear on the official palace maps. He had discovered these during his exploration of the building, routes that were used by the cleaning staff and repair crews. The plan worked so well that they managed to circle around behind the main attack force. While House Krexani warriors were busy searching the royal quarters for the Queen, she and her guards appeared behind them, turning the ambush into a counter-ambush. The fighting was fierce but brief. Caught between the automated defenses and the Queen's forces, the attacking warriors had no choice but to surrender or retreat. When the battle was over, Queen Vexathi stood in her throne room, looking at the destruction around her. Several of her advisors lay dead, including two she had trusted completely. The betrayal clearly shook her more than the physical attack. "You saved my life," she said to Tay, her voice quiet and thoughtful. "How you could have simply hidden during the fighting, or even tried to escape in the chaos. Instead, you chose to help defend the palace." "I made a choice," Tay replied simply. "You may have captured me, but that doesn't mean I want to see innocent. People die in a civil war." Queen Vexathi studied him with new eyes. "You fought for us as if this were your own home, your own people. I do not understand why." "Because that's what humans do," Tay said. "We protect those who can't protect themselves, even if we disagree with them. It's not about politics or power, it's about doing what's right." For the first time since his capture, the Queen looked at him not as a prize to be claimed or a problem to be solved, but as an individual with his own moral code and decision-making ability. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "I have been thinking about this situation incorrectly. You are not simply a warrior to be possessed. You are a strategic asset that chooses to be valuable. It wasn't freedom, but it was respect." And respect, Tay realized, might be the first step toward something better. The coup had failed, but it had also revealed something important. The Zephyrian Empire had enemies both within and without, and whether he liked it or not, Tay was now part of that struggle. After helping defend the palace, Tay's status in the Zephyrian court changed dramatically. No longer treated as just the Queen's claimed property, he was given the title of strategic advisor and access to parts of the palace that had been forbidden before. Most importantly, he was allowed to use the communication arrays, supposedly to help analyze tactical data, but actually giving him the chance he had been waiting for. 3 days after the failed coup, Tay managed to establish a secure connection with the human fleet. The signal was encrypted and routed through several relay stations to avoid detection, but finally, a familiar face appeared on his private communication screen. "Captain Tay?" Commander G1's voice was filled with disbelief. "My God, we thought you might be dead. The diplomatic mission reported that the aliens had taken you, but we've had no contact for over a month." "I'm alive, but the situation is complicated," Tay replied, keeping his voice low. The communication room was supposed to be private, but he couldn't be sure the Zephyrians weren't monitoring his conversations. "I need to brief you on everything I've learned about their society, their military capabilities, and their internal politics." Over the next several conversations, Tay shared detailed intelligence about the Zephyrian Empire. Their ship designs, weapon systems, population centers, and most importantly, the growing rebel movement that threatened to tear their civilization apart from within. This could be the advantage we need, Commander Jiwon said during their third secret meeting. If their empire is already weakened by civil war, it might be the perfect time for us to demand your release and negotiate from a position of strength. But Tae had learned something that changed everything. Commander, we have a bigger problem. The Zephyrians have been tracking something they call the Void Syndicate, a fleet of unknown vessels approaching this region of space. From what I've gathered, they're not explorers or traders. They're destroyers. The next day, Queen Vexathi summoned Tai to an emergency meeting in the war room. The chamber was filled with military commanders, intelligence officers, and representatives from the various houses. Holographic displays showed star charts with moving red dots that represented the approaching threat. "Show him," the Queen commanded one of her technicians. The display zoomed in on a sector of space about 6 months' travel from both Zephyrian and human territory. What Tae saw made his blood run cold. Hundreds of massive ships, each one larger than anything either humans or Zephyrians had ever built, moving in perfect formation toward inhabited systems. "And we have been monitoring this force for 3 standard years," explained Admiral Thexkani, the Empire's chief military strategist. "They have destroyed 17 civilizations in their path. No survivors, no negotiations. They simply arrive, eliminate all life, and strip the planets of resources before moving on." "Have you tried to communicate with them?" Tae asked. "Many species have tried," the Admiral replied grimly. "The Void Syndicate does not respond to diplomatic contact. They view all organic life as an infection to be cleansed from the galaxy." Queen Vexathi turned to face Tae directly. "Your strategic analysis helped save my throne. Now I need your insight on a larger scale. How do we fight an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than either of our species?" Tae studied the tactical displays, his mind racing through possibilities. The Void Syndicate fleet was massive, well-organized, and apparently unbeatable in direct combat. But there might be another way. "Alone, neither humans nor Zephyrians can stand against this threat," he said finally. "But together, maybe we have a chance." The room fell silent. The idea of an alliance between species was almost unthinkable to the Zephyrian military mindset. "Explain," Queen Vexathi commanded. "Human ships are smaller and faster than Zephyrian vessels, but our weapons are less powerful," Tae began, walking over to the tactical display. "Your ships are heavily armored and carry devastating firepower, but they're slower and less maneuverable. Separately, the Void Syndicate can destroy either fleet easily, but a combined force using human speed and Zephyrian strength together might be able to implement strategies that neither species could manage alone." "You're suggesting we share our military technology with humans," Admiral Thexkani said, her tone making it clear what she thought of that idea. "I'm suggesting we share tactics and coordinate our defenses," Tae corrected. "Human innovation combined with Zephyrian power. Your people are natural warriors, but humans excel at thinking outside conventional approaches." Queen Vexathi was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Such an alliance would require trust between our species, trust that does not currently exist. "Then we need to build that trust," Tae said. "And we need to do it quickly, because according to your projections, the Void Syndicate will reach this region in less than 4 months." That evening, Tae found himself in a position he never could have imagined. Queen Vexathi authorized him to contact the human fleet directly, not as a prisoner trying to escape, but as an official diplomatic representative of the Zephyrian Empire. "Commander Jiwon," he said during their next communication, "I need you to patch me through to Admiral Yuna and the entire fleet command. What I'm about to propose will sound crazy, but it might be the only way to save both our species." The conversation that followed was tense and difficult. The human commanders were suspicious of any deal that required working with the aliens who had kidnapped their captain. But when Tae shared the intelligence about the Void Syndicate, the mood changed quickly. "You're certain about these numbers?" Admiral Yuna asked, her face grim as she studied the tactical data Tae had transmitted. "I've seen their projections, their analysis, their panic," Tae replied. "The Zephyrians are genuinely terrified of this threat. They wouldn't be reaching out to us unless they were desperate." "And you trust this Queen Vexathi?" Tay paused, thinking about everything he had experienced over the past month. I trust her to act in her people's best interests. Right now, that means working with us. The negotiations that followed were complex and delicate. Both sides had demands, concerns, and deep-seated suspicions to overcome. But as the intelligence about the Void Syndicate became clearer, both humans and Zephyrians began to realize that they faced a threat that could end both civilizations. Tay found himself at the center of these discussions, translating not just languages but entire ways of thinking. His unique position as both a human military officer and an accepted member of the Zephyrian court made him the only person who could bridge the gap between species. The alliance that emerged wasn't perfect, but it was historic. For the first time in galactic history, two completely different species would fight side by side against a common enemy. The real test would come when the Void Syndicate arrived. The joint training facility was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human and Zephyrian engineers had worked around the clock to build a massive complex where both species could learn to fight together. The cultural differences were immediately obvious. Humans moved with quick, adaptable precision, while Zephyrians favored powerful, coordinated strikes that had served them for centuries. Tay stood on the observation deck, watching the first mixed training exercise through reinforced glass. It was not going well. "Your warriors are too rigid," Commander G1 said through the communication link, frustration clear in her voice. She had arrived with the human fleet 2 weeks ago and was still struggling to understand Zephyrian tactics. They follow predetermined patterns instead of adapting to changing situations. Below them, a team of 6 Zephyrian soldiers and 4 human marines were attempting a mock assault on a fortified position. The Zephyrians wanted to charge directly at the target with overwhelming force, while the humans preferred stealth and misdirection. The two approaches were completely incompatible. "And your soldiers lack discipline," Admiral Thexakani replied sharply. "They abandon formation the moment they encounter resistance. How can we coordinate an attack when your people refuse to follow established protocols?" Tay activated his own communication channel. "Both approaches have merit, but you're thinking about this wrong. We're not trying to make humans fight like Zephyrians or vice versa. We need to create new tactics that use both species' strengths simultaneously." He walked down to the training floor where the mixed unit was regrouping after their failed exercise. The soldiers from both species looked frustrated and confused. "Listen," Tay called out, getting everyone's attention. "Forget everything you know about how your own species fights. We're creating something completely new here." Over the next several hours, Tay worked with the mixed unit to develop tactics that had never been tried before. Instead of treating the humans and Zephyrians as two separate groups trying to work together, he began thinking of them as different tools in the same toolkit. "Sergeant Hyun," he called to one of the human marines, "your team is going to be the distraction. Create noise, draw their attention, make them think the main attack is coming from the east." Then he turned to the Zephyrian squad leader. "Kexathani, while the humans are creating chaos, your warriors will approach from the opposite direction. When the defenders turn to face the human distraction, you hit them with everything you have." The second attempt was dramatically better. The human marines used their superior speed and stealth to create confusion among the simulated defenders, while the Zephyrian warriors delivered a devastating assault from an unexpected angle. The combination of human unpredictability and Zephyrian power was remarkably effective. "Interesting," Queen Vexathi said, appearing beside Tay on the training floor. "Your tactical approach treats each species as a component in a larger machine, rather than trying to blend them into a uniform force." "Exactly," Tay replied. "Humans excel at improvisation and rapid adaptation. Zephyrians are masters of disciplined, overwhelming force. Together they can do things that neither species could accomplish alone." As the training continued over the following weeks, Tay found himself working more closely with Queen Vexathi than ever before. She no longer treated him as her claimed property, or even just as an advisor. Instead, she had begun including him in strategic planning sessions as an equal partner. "The Void Syndicate uses a formation we call the Death Web," she explained, during one late-night planning session, projecting a holographic display of enemy ship positions. multiple layers of overlapping fire coverage that makes it nearly impossible for traditional fleets to penetrate. Traditional fleets? Yes, Tay agreed, studying the pattern. But what if we don't attack it like a traditional fleet? He manipulated the hologram, showing how small groups of human ships could dart through gaps in the formation, while Zephyrian heavy cruisers provided covering fire from multiple angles. Human fighters are too small for their main weapons to target effectively, he continued, but they are also too weak to damage Void Syndicate ships directly. However, if they can get close enough to identify weak points and relay that information to Zephyrian gunners, the humans become spotters for our artillery, Queen Vexathi said, her compound eyes brightening with understanding. They guide our shots to the most vulnerable targets. But it gets better, Tay said, warming to the concept. While the human fighters are harassing their formation and the Zephyrian ships are hitting their weak points, we can use the confusion to deploy boarding parties. This was where the mixed training really paid off. Teams of humans and Zephyrians working together could infiltrate enemy ships in ways that neither species could manage alone. Human technical expertise could disable enemy systems, while Zephyrian strength dealt with security forces. The Queen leaned back in her chair. A gesture Tay had learned indicated deep thought. You're proposing we fight them with tactics they have never encountered before. Every species they've destroyed has used conventional military doctrine. That's the idea, Tay confirmed. The Void Syndicate is used to fighting civilizations that think like them. Purely military solutions, direct confrontation, superior firepower wins. But humans don't think that way. How do humans think? She asked. We cheat, Tay said with a slight smile. We use our enemies' expectations against them. We turn their strengths into weaknesses. We make them fight our kind of war instead of their kind. As the training progressed, the changes in Queen Vexathi were remarkable. She began asking Tay's opinion on everything from ship formations to supply logistics. More importantly, she started making decisions based on his recommendations, even when they contradicted traditional Zephyrian military doctrine. My advisors think I have lost my mind, she told him during one of their evening planning sessions. They cannot understand why I would trust strategic decisions to someone who is not even Zephyrian. What do you tell them? Tay asked. That you have already saved my life once, and your ideas are the only reason we have any hope of survival, she replied simply. But also, she paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I have begun to value your counsel not because you are my claimed mate, but because you see solutions that none of us can imagine. The transformation in their relationship was profound. What had begun as captor and prisoner had evolved into something approaching genuine partnership. They worked together, not because ancient law demanded it, but because they had learned to trust each other's judgment. The ultimate test of their collaboration came during the final training exercise, a massive simulation that involved coordinating the movements of over 200 ships from both species, along with thousands of soldiers, marines, and pilots. The exercise was a complete success. Human and Zephyrian forces moved together like parts of a single organism, each species compensating for the other's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. We're as ready as we can be, Commander G1 reported after the exercise concluded. The mixed units are performing at levels neither species could achieve independently. Good, Queen Vexathi replied. Because our long-range sensors have detected the Void Syndicate fleet, they will arrive in 3 days. The time for preparation was over. Now they would discover whether their unprecedented alliance could stand against an enemy that had never been defeated. The first sight of the Void Syndicate fleet was terrifying beyond anything the Allied forces had imagined. Through the bridge viewport of the flagship Zephyr's Pride, Tay watched as hundreds of massive black ships emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Each vessel was at least 3 times larger than the biggest Zephyrian battleship, their hulls covered in strange angular armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dear gods, Queen Vexathi whispered beside him, the intelligence reports did not adequately convey their size. Size isn't everything, Tay replied, though his own voice carried a tremor of uncertainty. Remember, They're used to fighting civilizations that think conventionally. We're going to show them something they've never seen before. The command bridge was a marvel of cooperation. Human and Zephyrian officers worked side by side at integrated control stations. Their different technologies merged into a unified command system. Communication channels buzzed with reports from over 300 Allied ships, the largest combined fleet either species had ever assembled. "Enemy formation is holding steady," reported Lieutenant Sora from the tactical station. "They're maintaining the death web pattern, just as predicted." "All ships, this is Admiral Yuna," came the voice from the human command vessel. "Remember your training. We stick to the plan, no matter how overwhelming they look." The Void Syndicate fleet began its advance with mechanical precision. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, creating overlapping fields of fire that had destroyed every opponent they had previously encountered. It was beautiful in its lethal efficiency. "Phase 1 begins now," Tay announced into the fleet-wide communications system. "All human squadrons initiate harassment protocol." What followed looked like chaos to anyone who didn't understand the plan. Dozens of small human fighters broke formation and began darting toward the enemy fleet in seemingly random patterns. To the Void Syndicate, it must have appeared that the alliance was already falling apart. The enemy response was swift and devastating. Massive energy beams lanced out from the black ships, destroying several human fighters in brilliant explosions. But the remaining craft continued their erratic approach, weaving between the energy blasts with desperate agility. "They're taking the bait," Queen Vexathi observed, watching the tactical display. "The enemy is concentrating fire on the human fighters, just as we hoped." "Because they think that's our main attack," Tay replied. "They don't understand that those fighters are just gathering information." Each human pilot was equipped with advanced sensors that could analyze enemy ship configurations and identify weak points. As they dodged and weaved through the Void Syndicate formation, they transmitted detailed targeting data back to the Zephyrian heavy cruisers waiting at maximum range. "Target acquisition complete," reported Commander Jiwon from her fighter squadron. "Transmitting priority targets to Zephyrian artillery units." "Phase 2, commence firing," Queen Vexathi commanded. The Zephyrian response was spectacular. Dozens of massive energy cannons opened fire simultaneously, their beams guided by the precise targeting data from the human scouts. Instead of the scattered, ineffective barrage the Void Syndicate expected, every shot hit critical systems with surgical precision. Several enemy ships staggered under the unexpected accuracy of the attack. Their perfect formation wavered as damaged vessels fell behind or veered off course. "Impossible," came a mechanical voice over the communication channels, the first time the Void Syndicate had ever attempted to communicate during battle. "Your weapons lack sufficient power to damage our vessels." "Then you're not paying attention," Tay replied, activating the emergency broadcast system. "Phase 3, all boarding parties go." This was the most audacious part of the plan. While the enemy was focused on the human fighters and recovering from the Zephyrian artillery barrage, mixed teams of humans and Zephyrians launched from hidden positions throughout the Allied fleet. The boarding craft was small, fast, and nearly invisible to enemy sensors. They slipped through the gaps in the Void Syndicate formation, while the massive enemy ships were distracted by the larger battle. "Boarding Team Alpha, we're inside," reported Sergeant Hyun over the tactical channel. "Beginning infiltration of enemy command systems." What the Void Syndicate didn't understand was that their ships, despite being technologically advanced, were designed around predictable engineering principles. Human technical expertise could identify system vulnerabilities, while Zephyrian warriors provided the muscle needed to fight through enemy security forces. "Enemy ships are reporting internal malfunctions," Lieutenant Sora announced with obvious excitement. "Multiple vessels showing power fluctuations and communication breakdowns." The tide of battle was turning. The Void Syndicate's perfect coordination was falling apart as their ships began suffering from internal sabotage. Their overlapping fields of fire became fragmented and ineffective. But the enemy wasn't finished. The largest Void Syndicate vessel, easily the size of a small moon, began moving toward the center of the battle. Energy readings from the massive ship were off the charts. "That's their command vessel," Queen Vexathi said grimly. If it reaches optimal firing position, it can destroy our entire fleet with a single weapon discharge. Then we don't let it get there, Tay replied, his mind racing through possibilities. All ships, new target priority. Concentrate everything on the command vessel. But our weapons can't penetrate its shields, Admiral Thexkani protested from her ship. We're not going to penetrate them, Tay said. We're going to get inside them. The final phase of the battle was the most desperate. Every available ship, from the largest Zephyrian battlecruiser to the smallest human fighter, converged on the enemy command vessel. The massive ship's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to stop external attacks, not an enemy that could get inside the shield perimeter. Tay coordinated the assault personally, guiding the complex dance of human speed and Zephyrian power. Fighter squadrons created openings that allowed boarding craft to slip through, while heavy cruisers provided covering fire that kept enemy escort ships at bay. "We're in," came the voice of Commander G1, leading the final boarding assault. Beginning attack on the central command systems. The battle for the command vessel's interior was fierce but brief. Human technical skills and Zephyrian warrior strength proved devastating against an enemy that had never faced such unconventional tactics. When the massive command ship's systems finally failed, the entire Void Syndicate fleet seemed to pause, in confusion. For the first time in their recorded history, they had been outfought and outthought. "This is impossible," the mechanical voice transmitted again, but now it carried something that might have been uncertainty. "No species has ever developed tactics you couldn't counter," Tay interrupted. "That's because you never fought humans and Zephyrians working together." The remaining Void Syndicate ships began withdrawing, their perfect formation completely shattered. They had come expecting an easy victory against two separate species. Instead, they had encountered something entirely new, a combination of human innovation and Zephyrian strength that proved greater than the sum of its parts. As the enemy fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Tay found Queen Vexathi looking at him with something approaching amazement. "Your species continues to surprise me," she said quietly. "You turned our greatest weakness, being outnumbered and outgunned, into our greatest strength." "That's what humans do," Tay replied. "We adapt. We find ways to win even when we shouldn't be able to." The Alliance had won, but more importantly, they had proven that cooperation between different species could create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. The victory celebration lasted 3 days across both human and Zephyrian space. News of the unprecedented defeat of the Void Syndicate spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in recorded history, the unstoppable force had been stopped, and word of the human-Zephyrian alliance reached civilizations that had never heard of either species before. Tay stood in the observation lounge of the New Sol, watching diplomatic vessels from dozens of different worlds arrive at the designated meeting point. Ships of every conceivable design filled the space around them, crystalline vessels from the Ethereal Consortium, biomechanical craft from the Hive Collective, and sleek metal ships from species whose names he was still learning to pronounce. "I never imagined anything like this," Commander G1 said, joining him at the viewport. "6 months ago, we were just exploring this region of space. Now we're at the center of what might become the largest interstellar alliance in galactic history." "It's overwhelming," Tay admitted. "All these civilizations want to meet the humans who helped defeat the Void Syndicate. They're treating us like we're some kind of military geniuses." "Aren't you?" Queen Vexathi asked, entering the lounge with her usual regal bearing, though Tay had learned to recognize the subtle signs of her amusement. "Your tactical innovations saved not just our 2 species, but potentially hundreds of others." The formal negotiations had been going on for weeks. Representatives from 47 different civilizations wanted to join what they were calling the Galactic Defense Federation. The humans found themselves in the strange position of being one of the youngest and least technologically advanced species in the Alliance, yet everyone wanted to learn from their strategic approaches. The Ethereal Consortium is offering to share their shield technology, Admiral Yuna reported during their daily briefing. The Hive Collective wants to trade their biological computing systems for human tactical doctrine, and the Mechanical Republic is asking if we'd be willing to help redesign their entire military structure. This is moving so fast, Tay said, reviewing the latest diplomatic proposals. A year ago, humanity didn't even know aliens existed. Now, we're being asked to help coordinate the defense of half the galaxy. But the most important conversation came later that evening, when Queen Vexathi asked to speak with him privately. They met in the same observation lounge where his journey had begun, though the circumstances were vastly different now. The Federation. Council has formally requested that you serve as the first human Zephyrian liaison, she said without preamble. It would make you the official diplomatic bridge between our species and the foundation for all future cooperation. That's a tremendous honor, Tay replied carefully. But what about my bonded status? According to Zephyrian law, I'm still your claimed mate. Queen Vexathi was quiet for a long moment, her compound eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the viewport. That is what I wish to discuss. The ancient laws that bound you to me were written in a different time, for a different purpose. You have proven yourself to be far more valuable as a strategic partner than as a ceremonial consort. She activated a small device, and a holographic document appeared between them. This is an official release from all bonding obligations. Sign this, and you will be free to return to your human fleet with no legal constraints from Zephyrian law. Tay stared at the document, feeling a mix of emotions he hadn't expected. For months, freedom had been his primary goal. Now that it was within reach, he found himself hesitating. What happens to the Alliance if I leave? And he asked. The Alliance will continue, Queen Vexathi replied, but it will be more difficult. Without someone who understands both cultures intimately, you have become essential to bridging the gap between our ways of thinking. And what happens to us? Tay asked quietly. The Queen's mandibles clicked softly. A sound he had learned indicated deep thought. What we have developed goes beyond the original bonding law. We have become true partners in ways I never expected when I first claimed you. Whether that continues would depend on your choice, not ancient legal requirements. Tay walked to the viewport, looking out at the incredible gathering of ships from across the galaxy. Each one represented a civilization that had come here because they believed in the power of cooperation between different species. The Human-Zephyrian Alliance had become proof that such cooperation was not only possible, but incredibly powerful. If I stay, he said finally, it won't be as your claimed mate or your property. It will be as an equal partner working together because we choose to, not because law demands it. I would prefer it that way, Queen Vexathi replied. What we have built together is too valuable to be constrained by ancient customs. Tay reached out and deleted the release document with a gesture. Then I choose to stay, not as Captain Tay of the human fleet, and not as the Queen's bonded mate, but as Tay, the first human Zephyrian liaison. The Federation Council will be pleased, Queen Vexathi said, but her tone carried a warmth that went beyond political satisfaction, though I confess I'm even more pleased for personal reasons. The ceremony establishing the Galactic Defense Federation took place 1 week. Later, representatives from 47 civilizations signed the founding charter, agreeing to mutual defense and shared resources in the face of threats like the Void Syndicate. Tay found himself at the center of it all, wearing a new uniform that combined human and Zephyrian design elements. He was no longer a starship captain or a prisoner or a claimed mate. He was something entirely new, a bridge between worlds, a translator of not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all species, he said, addressing the assembled delegates. 6 months ago, humans and Zephyrians were strangers who barely understood each other. Today, we stand together as proof that differences in biology, culture, and thinking are not obstacles to overcome, but strengths to be celebrated and combined. The applause that followed came in forms he was still learning to recognize. Sonic vibrations from the Ethereal Consortium, bioluminescent flashes from the Hive Collective, and harmonic resonances from species whose names he was still learning to pronounce. Later that evening, as the celebrations continued across the fleet, Tay stood with Queen Vexathi on the bridge of the Zephyr's Pride, watching the lights of 100 different civilizations twinkling in the darkness. "Do you ever regret claiming me that first day?" he asked. Queen Vexathi considered the question seriously. I regret the method, she said finally, but I cannot regret the result. Together, we have created something that neither of our species could have achieved alone. A partnership of equals, Tay agreed. A partnership of equals, she confirmed, and the foundation for a galaxy where differences are celebrated rather than feared. The human story had begun with one man's capture, but it would continue with humanity's emergence as the diplomatic heart of a galactic community united not by conquest, but by choice.